All right, this Hangout on Air is live. So, I'm still trying to wake up Kim from my nap. Oh, man.
Well, I guess we'll get started. Okay, well, welcome everybody. I will be facilitating today. I'm Kim, I'm in New York, and let's see, we have today, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Michelle Odom. I am also in New York.
I am Leonie Smith, and I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Well, welcome everybody. We are currently in our 10th session, and we are reading from Here Comes the Sun, and this is our 10th book together. Today we are reviewing chapters 3 and 4, and I didn't say that the author of Here Comes the Sun is Nicole Dennis-Benn. So let's get started. Did I miss anything?
Okay. Just you can learn more about us on Google Plus, Facebook, or
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so I'll read my summary. Okay, if I'm hearing some feedback, so I'm not sure if somebody needs to mute.
I'll try muting and see if that helps.
Oh, thank you. Okay, oh, that's much better, thank you. Summary of chapters 3 and 4. The theme of chapter 3 and 4 seems to be self-discovery under the restricted traps of shame, poverty, faith, and tradition. In addition to bleaching her skin to be seen as more attractive and hopefully acceptance, Thandi, an A student, still wants to follow her own path. She might risk everything to become an artist. She knows some of the sacrifices that her mother and her sister had suffered to earn her school fees. She knows that her family is banking on her lifting them up out of poverty like she is an insurance policy. When asked to compete in a Murarian contest, the art teacher told her that she must dig deeper and put more of herself on the page to be an artist. Thandi looks deeper and recalls being threatened, dragged behind a bush, and raped. We also learn more about Margot, as she services a repeat customer, Horace. We see her at work building a nest egg for her sister and thereby herself. Margot struggles with the blurred lines of sex as a means to money and the need to share such intimate moments with her lover who she wants to give herself to completely. Verdine recalled Margot as a child her mother took care of. But as their adult love grows, so grows the hatred and the ever-increasing abuse from the community. Margot must ask herself if she is ready for all that comes with loving Vereen. Key points and discussion questions. The first question, number 1, and the 2 questions.
I can do that.
Well, thank you.
As we read Here Comes the Sun, we come to see the generational nature of poverty in Jamaica and how a class system works up close, as even the minimal services offered to the poor elsewhere are not available here. A. Could one then surmise that the grass is greener for people of color in more developed nations? B. And if so, why don't the riches flow from the streets in countries like America for people of color?
Any comments? Well, I think from reading this chapter and from knowing people from the Caribbean, I do think that there is better services, and there are advantages to being in America. Public schools, minimal medical coverage. I mean, it may not be the best medical coverage, but at least it's something. I think there are ways of getting out of poverty. It may not be easy, but I think that there are ways, and I think there are also roadblocks to bar those same entry points. So, do I think that it's easier for people of color in America? I think it's just different. I think it's different, and I like how this chapter is bringing out how, for me, that when you have the certain mindset that no one is going to help you and that you have to do everything for yourself, I think that gives you a little bit of an advantage than to think that the welfare system or something is going to help you, only to find out that those services are so substandard until they're not actually as helpful as you think they are. There's a price to it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Way of saying it can look like the grass is greener. Developed nations. But really it's different. Yeah. And your second question, why don't the riches flow from the streets? Today I watched just a little bit. Oh, Visionary Dreamer joined the call. Hey. Call. We can't hear you. Are you talking?
It looks like her video is delayed, so.
Oh.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, hi there.
Oh, wow. Hi. Leonie said it looks like your video is delayed.
Oh, crap.
So it's not doing it anymore. It was just while you were coming in.
Oh, okay. Okay. Glad to
Okay.
know it's not doing it anymore. Okay.
We're on the first question. So I was kind of looking at the part, why don't the riches flow from the streets in countries like America for people of color? And there was this video posted this morning, 5 minutes long. I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched maybe about minutes of it by this guy who calls himself the Funky Professor. Frimpong. But it was talking about the need for government to a guaranteed income for Black people. in order for Black people to amass the resources necessary to truly be free. Because you're not really free if you don't have function in a capitalist society. Like I said, I didn't watch the whole thing, but you know, I like the idea of reparations. I certainly believe deserve. And, you know, and generally speaking, you know, I think we're not going to get anything unless we're making an effort to get it. So to some extent, I like the idea of a guaranteed federal job. But I do wonder, you know, if it could ever really be, than the welfare system. I mean, I think the system structured to have these massive inequalities, these great distances between the haves and the have-nots, that, you know, I don't even know that a guaranteed job is really the answer to our problem. So anyway, the riches, in my opinion, the riches do not flow from the streets like the United States for Black people or people of color, because essentially we're still a hated population. And it's hard for me to see how we hate you are ever going to be the answer. So.
What was your last sentence, Michelle?
I said it's hard for me to imagine how yes are ever going to be the answer to our problems. And I'm not saying all white people hate all Black people, but you know.
I'm losing some of your words every once in a while. It's like you're breaking up a tiny bit.
I'm not having that.
Okay.
I'm not having that. I'm wondering if it's on your end, Kim.
It must be. Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to let you know so that.
Yeah, I was losing some of your words, Kim, when you were reading the summary.
Oh.
I don't know what else I can do. Maybe I'll come back in and out.
I'm not missing too much of your words, and I wouldn't want to risk it because I know that you've gone out before and not been able to come back in. So okay. I think it's fine if you're willing to move forward.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to miss what Michelle is saying. Well, let's keep going. Okay. Did anybody else want to respond to the first question, or we can move on?
I think that things are different, but I do think that that the grass is greener as well. I don't think it's just down to being different. Because I think that there's something to say for there being the experience of like I can't imagine that people who live in a dominant country like America don't have advantage, even if you're on the low end. Especially when you're talking about third world nations that have the kind of history that the places in the Caribbean have. So there's definitely advantages. Just being from third world and first world there's an advantage there. But I think in terms of the second piece, I think it is down to what Michelle was saying, in that part of America's prosperity is down to the oppression of Black people. And that's why, which is, until you address that, nothing will help. Reparations, in my opinion, won't help until that's addressed. Because as long as a country thinks that there's a requirement for citizenship to be tiered, there's nothing you can do to make that up. There's nothing. So I think the and also too, the other piece around like riches flowing is that like the other thing too is that imbalance means that the things that people try to acquire, at least this is my view, which is definitely anti-capitalist, that the value that's placed on the things that people are meant to acquire that are normal, or even like the sense of like constant scarcity, is also a jacked up value. I don't know if riches are supposed to flow without consequence to humanity. So I just want to bring that up as well. Like, I think that there's a real imbalance that's there. And so I'd question the whole field, not just why people aren't getting advantage, but I'd question the whole getting advantage of what, to what gain. Because I also think about people who have received reparations or some kind of payment or whatever, and I don't know that people are benefited, you know? And I even think of some place like Israel having a land and nation, and did it make there's real consequences to that in terms of what humanity looks like there. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't see anything other than acknowledging dignity and respect and humanity as being a way to kind of move forward in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, I agree. To answer the question, is the grass greener for people of color in more developed nations? I think it's supposed to look that way. If we could think of like the Matrix as this, penultimate symbolism, it's supposed to look that way because America has her niggers, right? So what happens is there's this like psychic terror that people of color throughout the African diaspora, they don't understand a lot of times until they've had these very experiences living in America. Like, the question could quite possibly be, why can't you Black Americans achieve? What's happening? Why are you all overwhelmingly impoverished or at the bottom of all the statistics, be it healthcare, prosperity, whatever. All of this is linked, of course. But until they become the beneficiaries of American institutionalized racism in America, within the wider context of global white supremacy, it is difficult to fathom when you are occupied and we talk about colonized and restricted peoples. It is extremely difficult to fathom until they've had these experiences living in America. And so what ends up happening is if they so-called immigrate, so think about Margot and Thandi and the mother, what they are then positioned to do is to stay in the rat race and not necessarily see inequality, because at least they're doing better than. And that's how we pit the natives and the immigrants against each other, under this oppressive, capitalist, racist, capitalist, patriarchal. I could use all of Bell Hooks as monikers, right? But under this structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right. Michelle, could you read the next question? Number 2? First number 2.
And when Maxie asked Margot to marry him as some insurance to survive, she continues to turn him down. After reading a story about 2 lovers burnt to death, Margot asked, what can women who refuse the loving of men? Would being married, poverty's kitchen, make life easier? How? For who? And why do other women buy into and spread the shame of not being able to secure a man? Is a little piece of something that is more worry than worth better than being alone?
Thank you, Michelle. Any comments?
Well, imagine in poverty's kitchen as I do. Having a man here with me would make life easier. You know, as I have struggled with unemployment and underemployment and all kinds of things, I've actually been grateful that there been a man around that I would have had to try to. And, you know, I imagine the arguments, and so many people break up around financial challenges and or begin to treat each other poorly. I actually, so no. I'm wrong. Maybe, I don't know. I only know my own experience and haven't had to struggle with to deal with these very serious challenges in my own life. It would have been nice to have somebody who was truly understanding, but that seems to be hard. It's been hard. It's hard for me to find someone like that.
Thank you, Michelle. Anybody else?
You want to go, Nicole, next, or me?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I think that when Margot asked that question about what can women who refuse the loving of men expect, I think that there's some piece. Certainly, there's some piece of that in terms of the violence that is specific to somebody like her who is with women, like around lesbians or gay people. Like, she's speaking to that. But it's a distinction with very little difference, because patriarchy is so entrenched that women are in a situation where they often do need protection. For the vast majority of places in the world, women need marriage. Marriage is a protection for women, for sure. It's the only. It's sometimes is the only protection that women have. And that distorts our romanticized Western view of what marriage is. But in most places in the world, marriage is a very practical thing. It's about putting together resources and about protecting your life. And love and romance have nothing to do with may come later or not at all. I mean, certainly it's not the point of marriage, as we're raised to believe in this culture, that that's what marriage is for. So I think definitely for B, it does make life easier for a lot of women. I don't think it's necessarily necessary for women who are living in first world countries or in the developed world. I think, but for women like these women in the book, and for most women in the world, it's very much is necessary. It does make life easier. And I think that the buying into shame is about that, again, that idea of scarcity. It's like you can't get yourself that level of protection. And it's, it's, you show off a man like you show off a new dress. And I think that's where it comes from. I don't think that throughout the world, and I won't even say that. I don't think, especially in places where colonization and slavery, particularly that particular flavor of colonization, where scarcity is ever permanent, is not meant to be people support. Does not generate the sense of people supporting each other, because there's always a sense of scarcity. It's always, it's like, how many licks am I going to get? As opposed to the person who's next to me, because I might not survive it and he might. Like, that's what these people, we come from, right? So the only difference I see is that those of us living in the Western world or in first world countries have been exposed to the dream, the romantic kind of marketed idea of what marriage is. And most women in the world don't have the time, don't have the luxury of being able to step into that particular fantasy.
Your scarcity on with the connections tonight. Your scarcity comment, though, Leonie, reminds me of that video I posted last week of and speaking at Revolution Bookstore, and someone in the audience, a white man, as I recall, asked her. He said after he read the book, he said he kept expecting in the story where the community would come together and support each other, and so he was a bit disappointed that it didn't turn out like that. And her reply was something like, yeah, because that's not how it is, right? Yeah.
Okay, Miss Happily Married, speak to it.
I don't know about happily all the time. But I was kind of homing in on what can women who refuse the loving of men expect? And I think that is a way for, or kind of like a feminist battle cry almost, that regardless of who reads this text, whether it's a woman of color or, just women, trans women, whomever, that the label, the category woman the author gives us something that we can all identify with. And certainly if we've not had personal experiences, media have had ways to bring those stories to our attention, that this is how patriarchy disrupts and has a way almost of controlling narratives regarding safety. And so I love, having said that, I'll just say that I love how the author uses the fire and water and kind of like those very spiritual metaphors to pull us into this stunning love story, right? The unrequited love. And, you know, and I'm almost having these moments with myself when Margot's younger, where I'm thinking, and of course, Vardine was just being a protector, right? When Margot is younger. But I don't know when Margot is saying, like, I've always, like, she's kind of always known that she loved her. What kind of agency am I willing to give a young girl? So it's just making me, it's pulling me deep as a reader deeper into this love story to kind of, I'm having to separate kind of like the sacred and the profane here. So just kudos here. But in terms of speaking to marriage, no.
Mm-hmm.
You know, day by day, minute by minute. Some days you think to yourself, I could have had a V8 instead, you know?
That's one of my favorite. At a V8.
Wow.
But,
Well, thank
I mean,
you.
I
Thank
think
you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michelle.
I think one answer to that question, A, is that women who refuse the loving of men can expect to be alone. So, Leonie talked about the protection aspect marriage. But, and I agree that we can luxury of being alone in developed countries, where we don't, do that in other places. But, since we have the luxury, that's what it is, that you have to whether or not you can actually handle being alone. And there's a lot of this story before. When my son was years old, he was on the phone talking to and I heard him say, "You don't have anybody? Man, you don't have somebody." And I thought, did he get an idea like that? Not from me. That's not what I believe. But I do think that it is a belief that's out there, broader culture. And so, so as an individual alone, you have to figure out what your beliefs are around that, how you feel about it. And And depending on your conclusion, that is either going to lead you to a life of possibilities, leave you with a lot of pain. Down to see and feel the shame that society seems to want you to feel that you are nobody, somebody. And so if you believe that, then I think the woman who refuses the loving of men, or just doesn't seek it, like myself personally, antagonistic to a loving man, have never, I'm just not the one that Kim's part C question is a little piece of something that is more worry than worth. For myself, versus having not compatible with. But, if Mr. Right came along, or if it turns out to be Miss Right, then I'm open to it. But that hasn't happened.
Thanks, Michelle. I know for me, I prefer, it's not that I prefer, as long as I'm working on building a community and building family, if there's a man involved, that's fine. But I'm very big into making connections, and it doesn't always, the romantic connection is not the highest in my list. This is not, because I know for a fact if something happens to me, my girlfriends will be there for me. And I'll be there for them. And so I feel it's real important to have those community connections. But, I do see that there are some advantages to being married that other men may not treat you as, as just if you're alone. But the sad part is that you could be married to somebody who treats you worse than the man outside might. So then you got the evil in your house.
Right.
And I know that I remember hearing in Brazil that if you offended your husband, if you caused him embarrassment, he had the right to murder you. So I don't think anybody walks away from this system, this imbalance, without being scarred by it, especially women. So I don't take it for granted that it's easier for me to be alone in this country. I don't take that for granted at all, even though I still find that it's more women who are indoctrinated with this and who say the most harmful things to other women who are thriving without a man. And, when you look at our men and the incarceration rates and the life expectancy rates, it's like we need to wake up to the fact that, do the math. If you do the math, there's a different reality than what we are spoon feeding each other with shame. That it's just, the numbers don't add up anymore in America for each of us to have that individual person. And I feel particularly bad for younger women who the whole dating scene is different. It's just different. And, all you got to do is get yourself a little piece of man, and anything you need to do to keep him, you do that. I feel like that's such a shaming place to be, that you have to subject yourself to whatever it takes to keep somebody. So I think I just need to build myself and build my community. I'm sorry?
Very destructive for the men in our community. because I think that they really need women to hold them to certain standards so that they learn how to strive and push and build their character and capacity. And so when women are just doing any and everything, then I think what they learn is to hover at the bottom.
Yeah.
To take advantage of that. And, and I think as a whole, it is very harmful to us.
That is so true. That is so true. Well, while we move on to the next question, Nicole, would you like to read the number? Is it
The second two?
the second two?
Yeah.
Okay. When Maxie asks Margot to marry him as some insurance to survive the rainy nights, she continues to turn him down. A. After reading a story about two lovers burnt to death.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Wait. I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong one. I'm sorry. Okay, number two, the second two.
Yes.
Margot recalls her.
Go right ahead.
Margot recalls her grandmother singing the same songs of sorrows. Yet religion is a tradition that is used to ties the oppressed and at the same time provide hope in the by and by. When Margot says that God never put a roof over her head or food on her table, she is letting us know that her faith is not in the God of the church. A. How does one reconcile their unwavering faith and their generational poverty? And B, as the Christians pass Berdine's home, they offer her up to their Lord. Wow, that's deep.
Mm.
Well, let me just say, initially, I was taken aback by, the continuity of these sorrow songs that they keep generation after generation, wherever you are, the African diaspora and, the motherland, those sorrow songs don't cease, right? So it says something about the connectedness of the experience. It says something about, our energy. And it says something about how music has been utilized and how we continue to utilize music to help us overcome such structural oppression. But I would have to say the reconciliation of an unwavering faith with a generational poverty, like it's no small wonder that these people who are professing to be Christian are doing some of the most cruel things in the name of God, right? But also that I can sense a creolized religious culture here. And this is, as Black Americans throughout the African diaspora, I think this is what we get because religion is so closely tied, especially Christianity, to white supremacy. And what kind of white God would I had that question even as a young girl. What kind of white God is, because that's the imagery that you tend to see, the predominant imagery. What kind of white God would have pastors and ministers and men and women of the clergymen and women explain that we are equal and there's this liberty and this freedom in Christ, and yet a demographic is people are allowed to suffer, like from a specific demographic, because here's what we know, whether in America or globally, we and I say that loosely when I say we, white people are not allowed to suffer like this. So what kind of God? What I see these people doing here is practicing, I would argue, a creolized religion where you're throwing, what is it, rooster heads and dead dogs and putting making the signs of a cross, metaphorical, I guess, blood on the home. To me, that's another religious practice. Also with Christianity, but it also speaks to the cruelty that so many have performed while professing Christianity.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, I would just say, with Nicole, I think, what is at this point is that Margot not believe in those religious ideas and practices. She represents a new generation, a different way of thinking. She's also kind of antagonistic about the idea of revolutionary politics. Mm-hmm. She has a very practical approach to life, a very clear-eyed, practical approach to life. And we may or may not like that she makes about how to survive, what she sees as a oppressive system, but she's not putting her eggs in any idealistic, fantastical, and so in terms of how do people, go generation from generation, suffering the same oppression, I see her body that's trying to break that pattern, that have really proven ineffective.
Yeah, we're quiet tonight. Anyone else before we move on?
Sure. You don't have any contributions, Kim?
The questions are great, really. They're very thought-provoking.
I guess my feeling is always, and I only can speak from an African American perspective, and so I just want to be clear that that's my experience, and I don't have, more of a view of religion in the Caribbean. But I'm always amazed at how slavery, those who were doing the masters, that they would allow the enslaved to go to church. There's a part of me that says they wouldn't let you read. They wouldn't let you plant your own ideas. But this is the idea that it was okay for them to plant. And how you didn't have to have any happiness, any joy on earth, but you would get yours in the by and by. And that I find there is a comfort and a soothing that I don't think that we can dismiss, that soothing was necessary. But it feels like a double-edged sword. It feels like it soothed you into a little bit of complacency. So even now that if I'm really, really down, I need to hear some gospel music, and that'll change my whole psyche. But at the same time, at what point do I take action, and at what point do I question that same God to kind of say, hey, look at here, things ain't adding up right, so I'm doing a lot of questioning myself right now, just in terms of the perfect storm that is racism. That how all of this came about. It just like everything just fell into place for one group of people, and anybody who could assimilate and then were accepted in that group of people. So, because at one point, there were Irish and Jewish people, and Italians were not white. So how is this perfect storm that happened that, all of a sudden Jesus and God and the Bible is the thing that is the playbook. And I just find it very disconcerting and troubling as to how much faith is too much faith.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting.
That is powerful.
It is very powerful. Yeah. I think so, this question about like faith and how it's taken up by the oppressed, I just, hold in mind that so many people don't see themselves as being oppressed.
Mm.
And I also think that like it takes so much to come out from under the foot of life for so many people in the world, like not just Black people, like so many people in the world, that miracles seem like a reasonable ask. Because it takes so much. It's not like there's a clear pathway to move from making 25 cents a day. Like there's not like a way to get out from underneath that. So believing in whatever, it seems, why not? Why not go for it, And the other thing too is that like, again, I think in terms of systems, and the thing that kind of gets me about how, in this case, Black people kind of interact with religion, or even how oppressed people interact with religion, is that like religion really is not benevolent traditionally, like in its history of organized religion, is not benevolent unless you are rich and unless you are moneyed.
Mm.
It has always been used as an oppressive thing. And it doesn't come from the scriptures. I haven't read the Quran or the Torah or whatever, but I did grow up in a religious tradition, which I think I've shared before, I'm not a believer now, where I was required to read the Bible from cover to cover many times. So I'm very familiar with the book. And there is a lot of beauty in scripture, regardless of what the book is. But there's something in it's human beings that have gotten into the habit of like making it all about fire and brimstone. That doesn't come from the book itself. Like, there's a way that we have been habituated to like think that like Revelation is like the only book in the Bible instead of the other 65 books in the Bible. Like, it's just like there's so much focus on fire and brimstone. And I think that comes from capitalism. I think that's where it comes from. Because religion has always been about, organized religion has always been about acquiring health. It's the very first model of the, they were the original 1%. And it was always about capitalism because it doesn't come from the book itself. I can at least say that about the Bible. The Bible is not a book that's filled with all bad and the scary stuff. It's got some stuff in it, but it's got a lot of stuff that if you were to follow it or reflect on it is good and positive and benevolent. We just have been, our choice as humans has been to interact with it. You love because of fear of fire and brimstone. You hate because of fear. Like, the motivation is not good. It comes from a place of like deficit, scarcity, and like, I need to survive. I need to get into those, heaven has gates. Like, doesn't even make any fucking sense. Sorry. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, even that idea is so perverse. So I just see the systems in it. That's it.
Well, thank you.
I think, your point about scarcity, Leonie, also, and how humans the biblical text, I guess in a very human way. Like, I'm thinking about the gospel, how first world people seem to be on to that approach, because it's apparently saying something here. Even though there's still the great disparity and inequality between these super rich pastors and congregations, I think having that up there as an image of what's possible, it is the hope that is attractive for people. From what I can hear, those pastors or pushers, prosperity gospel, are looking at the Bible not in a God-like way, not in a Jesus-like way, but in a very human way, which is filled with greed, all the other failings that we have as mere mortals. So
I think one of the things that I always find concerning is the tax status of churches and how for a lot of our churches, if you do anything political and you unite your community, you lose your tax status. But that was the whole point for churches, was to unite the community. So if they are deemed political in any way, shape, or form, they lose their umbrella of coverage. So it just seems like if I can't be empowered at church, but I still go and I sit in my pew and I pray to my God, it just feels it's a lot for me to reconcile that my God may still be powerful, but the state has more power over me and who's speaking to me about what than my church does or my God does.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to get stuck on this point over and over and over again. So that's kind of what I'm struggling with personally.
This is very deep. I'm actually right now taking an Africana, well, looking at Africana studies, but looking at African traditional religions. And I keep locating myself in this tradition that I had never really been exposed to before, and I've been raised Christian and questions. And to go back to what Michelle says, my predominant question, I keep getting back to, Michelle says, so like the enslaved couldn't read, right? But then plantation masters would allow them to attend church. And then to really understand that it was so important for them to break them in, to force them to accept Christianity, that very visceral, all of our our minds go back to with in Roots, right, where they're breaking Kunta, and finally he relents. Okay, it's Toby. I just wonder if we're in a season of reawakening.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's where we are as Black people throughout the diaspora. I wonder if artists and whether it's, singers, poets, painters, our creative energies are moving toward this different kind of different sacred imaginaries. We're finding ourselves, I can't say outside of Christianity. I believe that our religions are going to be creolized anyway. I know that the Christianity are the cultural practices, the cultural religious practices that some of my friends had, there might have been social class differences or racial differences. It's those things do kind of influence, even if we are claiming to all be Christian. Because I know when I was a young girl attending what we call holiness church, and people get the spirit, and right, but when we moved into middle class spaces, it's like y'all ain't running around here, sit down somewhere, boo. So it's like so those differences have a way of seeping in, but I think the time is right for us to, and I don't want to, we're gonna totally get away from Christianity or Islam or whatever our beliefs are. But I do think that we're searching. There is especially as the middle class shrinks and we are dealing with these financial crises in the nation and globally, it causes us to have a different gaze, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where is this God, and why are some people so privileged? Why is that white woman? Why is it that white woman doesn't have to have the talk with her children and I do? Right? So, this book is awesome. Brings a lot of this to mind. Kim, great questions too. Very good. A lot of reflective.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. So now we're at 3. Thandi is covered in plastic wrap and chemicals. Her skin is in the process of changing. After all, it's hot weather, and to be covered is like hiding in public. Why is it that neither Margot nor Dolores sees Thandi in the early stages of her imploding? I'll just kind of say, I just find this shocking that you live in this little shack. It's not like they're in a 20-room house where Thandi can go and, she's taking the plastic wrap into the bathroom and she's mixing her chemicals and she's putting on her sweats and the hoodies and all of this stuff. And here you have 2 other women in the house that don't see you coloring your skin. And I wonder what they're looking at that they're not looking at her. I just find it. I know that they believe that she's their savior and that they want to sacrifice everything they possibly can. But if she's the golden goose, you gotta keep an eye on the golden goose. And when she says that she has been raped, and she comes home after the rape, and no one notices a torn stocking or dirt on the back of the dress or anything, it just makes me wonder what it is that we are looking at when we're not looking at each other.
I think that they don't see.
Great question.
Yeah, it's really good question. But I think Thandi is a strategy. She's not really, they don't have time for her to be a person.
Wow.
Right? They are barely human themselves. They're working and hustling. You understand what I'm saying? They're working and hustling.
Right. I agree, Leonie, which I feel like they're in hiding as well. Each of these women is in hiding. And so it's difficult to recognize how the other person or what the other person is hiding.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Because she is so busy counting her money that she didn't even notice the girl was standing there.
Right. And Kim, this is after she kind of low-key brags to us, right? Like she's the spy on the job. She's even overheard people talking about her. She creeps into spaces. And it's like, well, your talent is developed that you didn't even hear your younger sister, the golden goose, here in the space, right? And your cover is blown because Thandi knows that she's very aware that you have American dollars. You're dealing with, it's like Margot is dealing with someone who's paying her straight American cash. So wow, that's so interesting.
Wow, thank you.
And also, chapter 3. Kind of looking at that Margot has on those around her, or people see her, what they're projecting onto her of reality, and how they know, and they believe what they believe. Like even with Verdine, there's all of this about he knows this woman. They've got a whole long list of transgressions that they've projected onto her. And they believe their beliefs, regardless of lack of fact. It's like an acceptance of the world. And, you know, very much the culture. The effort, the curiosity, you know, whatever it is it takes to want to actually get to the truth. I think for a lot of people, it's just easier, and you know, maybe this goes for religion too. Believe what you believe without examination.
For sure. I was struck by something Leonie said. Just that you have to be human to see other people.
Human to see other people?
You were saying that in order for the mother and the sister to see the younger sister, they would have to see their own humanity in order to see hers.
Yeah, something like I think what I said exactly was something that they don't have time to see her as a person because she's a strategy, and that they're barely human.
Right.
Like they are just in the game of survival. That they barely have time for anything connected with humanity.
Mm-hmm.
They're all like actors and just trying to survive. Because remember, keep in mind, this is the thing, keep in mind what the goal is. The goal is for Thandi to be able to pay for her education just to pull them out of abject poverty. They're not like looking to buy a big house here. It's like just to get what like our day-to-day norm is in the Western country. They have to give up everything for this to happen.
The thing I find so fascinating about your comment is that when you are oppressed, eventually you lose some may lose the ability to see your own people as human too. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That just explains so much in terms of the internalized racism and the self-hate. It just kind of says that once you lose your humanity and someone strips you of that, it is harder for you to see the humanity in those who should be your loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's a new thought for me.
Mm.
And we've been reading about internalized racism and self-hatred and everything, but I get it from that comment. That looking at how that girl has that plastic bag on and that hoodie and those chemicals, and nobody sees it.
Right.
Wow. And that's why I just think racism is such a perfect storm.
Yeah. It's like also too, I think like because I had this conversation when I was at this conference that I went to on power and privilege. And one of the conversations that kept happening with people of color that we noticed in terms of like a difference between people of color and white people is that so many times you have to like explain things to white people, and people of color, it's like not only do you not have to explain things, but they kind of look at you stupid, like you don't get it. Like my friend, she's South Asian, but from Kenya. Like her family hasn't been in India for like 100 years. And there's like this hand expression I think that she was doing that they do in Kenya. That's kind of like, you don't get like what, like are you stupid? So there's like not a need to speak to it. It's like, because remember when she's with the art teacher and it says in the book, don't know whether or not he heard like the plastic or whatever. It's like, he doesn't have to acknowledge it because of course he could recognize it for what it is. There's nothing to speak to, right? It's just innate, this understanding that I think comes from, it's the same way that like white people can't see white privilege, but it's kind of like, it's like, if someone does a microaggression and you and I are talking about it, Kim, we're not exploring it. We're not trying to discover it. There's nothing to discover. It's like, you get it. I don't have to explain myself. But like when you're talking to a white person, it's like, you could talk to the nth degree and get nowhere. So there's this like sense of like people, you just know it. You know that the impression's so innate that it's kind of like, it's like a reverb. You always know it's there.
Anybody else before we move on? Nicole, anything else before we move on? All right. Okay, so then the last question is, and this is number 4. Did anybody want to read 4? I can read that. The Meridian is the holy grail of artwork in the school. It was named after a white nun whose favorite pastime was painting workers in the fields. Whenever she came on missionary trips to the plantation, she would title her paintings Negro Picking Corn, Negro Under Tree, Negro at Sunset. Her paintings had gotten national acclaim. When we speak of legacies, having others document our lives, what might be the impact on generations past, present, and future of such paintings? And I'll start. It was just that when I was reading this Negro Picking Corn, I had a visceral response to it. Like, not person picking corn.
I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, when I listened, especially when they said it had national acclaim, I'm like, that's Jamaica. That's Jamaica right there. I thought it was hilarious. I'm like, yep, that's Jamaica. That was the very thought I had. Yep, that's Jamaica. Of course that has national acclaim.
Wow.
So
I also think it's like always having this image of Blackness being funneled through a white gaze, right? And then it's funneled through this gaze and then repackaged and sold, commodified, right? And people are purchasing this very stereotypical products that result from this white gaze. But yet, the Black man, or Thandi, who's even wondering if she could make it as an artist, they have no hope for themselves in art. The Black male teacher even says, I just do this, I teach this as like a vocational subject. Like, in other words, no one can really make a living of this, and yet this white woman can have receive these accolades and this critical acclaim as a result of painting themes that don't disrupt whiteness,
Yes.
that don't confront whiteness, and that stays and keeps Blacks firmly packed into that racist hierarchy. So she could then make a living. She could make money and profit from that, but they cannot.
Right. Well, thank you, Nicole.
This question also makes me think about the current state of rap music. You know, just that as long as we're producing music that it's ugly stereotypes, it's eaten up, you know, by the mass society. But there's a video going around currently about that. I think it's called something like "What Would Happen if Black men produced rap music that was positive." The title's not that praised Black women, something like that. That for some reason is not the kind, and that kind of music exists, but it's not the kind of music that gets the mass marketing, that makes the big money that white folks are trying to hear. I mean, I think that in terms of Kim's question, what is the impact on generations past, present? For looking back at the past, you know, I think it can, like the kind of sort of affairs that we have right now, where there's all of this sort of talk about fake news and what's real and what's not real, and this effort to change and say things like, you know, slavery was a fun thing. It was a happy day. They laughed and played, skipped, and loved. You know, you can paint the picture that tells the story that you want to tell, and so that when future generations look back on past, you know, there can actually be some cause for and I think for people in the present, that kind of thing is a subtle message about and this is where you belong, you know, and don't expect your future to be any different. You know, there was this this woman, I don't know her name, a white woman, blonde, aged, who was apparently some kind of spiritual advisor to and she said she meets with him weekly. I don't know.
Who was she a spiritual advisor to?
Donald Trump.
Oh, okay.
And she was talking about how he is in she was talking with great fervor and passion. He is in direct communication with God. He is doing the work that God wants him to do, and that all of us who oppose him are really actually the devil. And and she was so serious, Kim. I didn't share it because I can't share stuff like that.
Okay.
But sometimes I do stop to watch. And but it's just always so striking to me. What we believe matters. As Nicole said earlier, white people don't allow themselves to suffer, allow others to suffer. But I don't really believe that these others are human beings if we're still at that place where our humanity is not acknowledged. Then it allows for all kind of atrocity.
Yes. Yes.
Pictures, the art is part of the cultural conditioning and messaging to let people know and what is not.
There's no audio from you, Michelle.
I stopped talking.
Whatever you just said, Michelle, it wasn't heard.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I don't know what I just said. What did I just say? I said that the art is a part of the cultural thing. People know what's okay and what's not okay. Planning this idea that people are less than, then it helps other people to have a certain comfort level with some of the atrocious things that go on.
Thank you, Michelle. I know for me, in terms of the past, it was that you're being studied and you're being looked at as some specimen. And I love in terms of the present that there's so many, and I think this goes back to something Nicole said, there is this energy around advocacy and you making your own art to portray who you are, to tell your story. And that's why I love at the end, Michelle always writes, reading together to telling our stories. What is that quote, Michelle?
Reading our story together.
Yes, I said it wrong. Thank you. And so I'm just thinking of one artist where she takes paintings and puts these real surreal images inside a painting that just would not belong there. And it's so in your face. I'll find it and share them. But that's one thing that I love. And also tell it out old stories. And I just have this image of a painting that I want to paint about what making America great again looks like. And it's a man being lynched. Because that's when it was great for you, wasn't it? So I like that. And I didn't, even though I laughed, Leonie, when you said that's Jamaica for you, I didn't quite understand all of what that meant. And I don't know if you could elaborate a little bit more.
It's just such this is something that I've seen consistently in terms of interacting with people, with other Jamaicans and other people from the Caribbean. It's just this being steeped in colonialism. So it's this idea that you would celebrate somebody who, like, as obvious as calling all paintings Negro, that's a person that you would celebrate, like not seeing it. You know, I think I've shared before, Jamaica built like a brand new airport in Montego Bay, and they named it after Errol Roberts, like the actor who played Robin Hood, just because he's a white man and he vacationed there. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that is so Jamaican. It's just, that's it. So I know there's going to be parts of reading this book that I'm going to laugh at that maybe you guys won't get. I mean, you'll get it like once I explain it, kind of like what I'm seeing. But like when I read that line in National Thing, like I was pissing myself laughing. So is that clearer now, Kim?
That's real clear. And it's funny, it reminds me of a friend of mine who is from the South, and he just believes a lot of times that if a police officer tells you to put the knife down and you don't put the knife down, you should be killed. so it may look different and smell different in the different diaspora, but it's still there. So it's not only can we laugh to, but we can relate to it in certain people in our circles. So it's always, you know, like certain people say, oh, I gotta get a white doctor. You know, make sure you get a white doctor. It's just like, really, dude? So I'm glad you explained it, and now I know exactly what you're saying and how that relates to, you know, my community here too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, folks, does anybody have any quick things to say before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention today, I think, psychiatrist friend on Facebook, and he likes to of provocative about Black history, police brutality, all kinds of stuff. That Facebook now is doing something different. He had posted a picture and Facebook had it blurred out, a message saying photo can be triggering if you want to reveal the image. And so, you know, I have seen a number of people on Facebook over the years complain about being triggered by various imagery, which I'm not a real visual person. You know, I do understand that and that art and images may have a or different kind of impact on them than you know, than maybe I really experience or appreciate. But you know, but definitely art speaks. It speaks.
Good. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, well,
these are actually wonderful questions.
Yes, thank you, Kim. Great job.
Awesome.
Oh, I appreciate that. Wow. Well, I guess, Michelle, I want to turn it back over to you to close us out.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything to say. Anybody else have any final comments? So I guess what that means, a pleasure as always seeing all of you, and we will see you same bat station next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. reading our story together. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, y'all.
Michelle, could you turn the